Good morning, everybody, and welcome to, I'll say it quickly, sunny Penzance. It's really, really good to see so many of you here. As James says, I'm Jim McKenna. I've chaired the Landscape Partnership Board since its inception in 2014. It's generally been a privilege, but the last couple of years have been difficult because all the meetings have been online. So I'm hoping our next meeting in February will be face-to-face with pasties. So that's the main rationale for supporting it. So Phil asked me a few days ago to say a few words, so that's what I'm doing to get things going. In a former life, I was Chief Exec of the former District Council at Penwith, and we set up the first Farm Business Advice Centre at Long Rog, which some of you may remember, and that's now morphed into Farm Cornwall, and we have the Rodder family, it would appear, somewhere nearby, and they're very supportive of that thing. Is that right, David? Yeah. Excellent. Sorry, you'll find I pick on people while I work out what I'm going to say next. So is that right, David? Louder, please. No? Fine, good. It's great to see so many people here involved in farming, and looking at today's programme, it does promise to be a fantastic event. I'm just avoiding the camera now, sorry. So, with something for everyone. So, thank you for taking the time to be here. I'm acutely conscious as a non-farmer as to the demands of the role and how long your days are, so it is appreciated that you've taken time to come and see us today, particularly those who've travelled a long way from out of Penzance. As a relative outsider looking in, which I guess is what I am, it does seem that the sector is constantly being challenged, finding enough people to work in the industry, a growing awareness that we import way too much food in this country, and that's, I guess, where you can help, and the undeniable fact that our climate is changing, to name but 3 areas. Additionally, the amount of media interest seems to have ratcheted up in the last year or two, so it's not without its challenges, it's probably a polite way of putting it. So today's event is particularly timely, given the focus on excellence, well-being and support, looking forward whilst respecting the traditional ways of farming, reducing its impact on the environment, and of course making enough money to sustain and potentially enhance your business. From my perspective, there remains a huge amount to be optimistic about locally and throughout Cornwall. In Penzance, for example, we now have more independent shops than we had 5 years ago, which is a positive sign, because that's definitely the future. And we've secured more than £30 million worth of government investments to help regenerate the town over the last 3 years. The same applies to St Ives, the same applies to Camborne, the same applies to Truro. So West Cornwall is looking good, really, in terms of future prospects. In terms of some research I did, which was done at 6 o'clock this morning, I'm struck by the number, looking at the agenda for today, the programme, the number of you guys who've developed your own market and are selling direct to customers. Again, that's got to be a way forward, and it avoids necessarily having to accept what supermarkets pay. So well done to those that do it, and hopefully that'll be something that grows. When we continue with the regeneration in Penzance, some of you will be familiar with Market House, otherwise known as the Lloyds Bank building. We've just acquired ownership of that, and one of the first things we're looking to do is to put in a whole floor which will form a local food market in undercover, a great place to base yourself in the centre of town. And I'm sure David will be making a note of that in terms of opportunities for farm businesses to get involved in that. Sorry for picking on you, David, but you did sit at the front. So, if it's possible to convert dirt to soil, if it's possible to introduce future profitable farming systems locally, if it's possible to provide support to those who work in the sector, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, develop ways of converting waste into fuel, and produce proper and some food, and forgive my pronunciation, then the future has to be looking good. So, one final thing. With us later will be Claire Wallerstein, who produced a brilliant film entitled Food for Thought. I had the privilege of seeing a preview of that in December, and it really is very, very good and a good watch. And I think there's an opportunity to see elements of that during the lunch break today. It's part of a series entitled Cornwall Climate Stories. It's a balanced account, a genuinely balanced account of the challenges faced by farmers down here, but also the incredible resilience and productivity and positivity that so many of you show. So watch it if you can. And can I embarrass one further person, please? Lisa, would you like to stand up, please? Lisa wouldn't like to stand up, so sit down. But Lisa Guy, who farms in the far west, was, I think we'd probably, when you see it, you'll realise she was this star and one of the most relaxed, comfortable presenters I've ever seen. So really, you should be doing this job, not me. So a round of applause for Lisa as well, please. So to conclude, thank you again for giving up your time. It's much appreciated, as is the work you do. It now remains for me to hand over to Julian Ellis, who's chairing the first session. Thank you. Julian.
Good morning, everybody. Can you all hear me okay? You might not be able to see me, but believe it or not, I am standing up. So it's my pleasure this morning to chair the first session, which is entitled Dirt to Soil. We have a very expert group of panellists here this evening to entertain us and enlighten us on the subject. Briefly, a little bit about myself. Most of you know who I am, but I farm in partnership with my father on a very traditional mixed farm at St. Buryan. We're milking Guernseys, growing spring cabbage, spring barley, a little bit of beef, and some contracting as well. And anything really that we think we might make a quid at, which is easier said than done, but we try. First of all, I'd like to introduce our speakers. To my immediate left, we have Ryan Came Johnson. He's an agronomist with Hutchinsons. Most of you, I expect, will have seen him going around. He spends an awful lot of his time treading through fields and over soil, so far more than qualified to be on our panel this morning. On my far left, we have Tom Tolputt. Hello. He's a co-founder and a consultant with Terrafarmer, so also way more qualified to be on our panelists this morning. And actually, I would advise you, after you've gone away from here today, to check out his website. Very impressive. I did have a look last night. It's quite good. And on my far right, we have Mike Roberts, who's got no idea why he's qualified to be here this morning.
That's right too.
But he is involved with the Cornwall Net Zero project, so hopefully he's going to enlighten us a little bit more on that. We shall hear from our panellists in turn, starting with Tom, then Mike, then Ryan. They're going to give a presentation each, and then there will be chance then for audience participation questions. When you do ask a question, could you please stand up, give your name, and if you like, the company that you're representing. So before we start, can I ask everybody on their feet, please? Can you all stand up?
Us as well?
You can, yeah, you can get up if you like, yeah. Now, sit down if you're only here for the free meal. Right, that's good. That's encouraging. So everybody that's here wants to be here except for you. Now, remain standing if you are a farmer or your main business is producing food of some description from soil. I've ruled out quite a few. Now, perhaps now you can remain standing if in your enterprise you have done something recently to experiment how you can improve on soil health. So ideally sort of direct drilling, min-till, herbal lays, witchcraft, whatever you think you might have tried. If you haven't tried anything, sit down. Now remain standing if you think you know everything you need to know about soil health. That's good news, because everybody that's here wants to be here, and nobody knows an awful lot. So the panelists can tell us what you like, and you'll probably get away with it. Right, so if we can kick off, please, with Tom.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I've never sat down to do a talk in my life, so if I get invited to this dance, you'll understand.
Could you just shuffle in a bit, Tom?
Yeah, here we go. I farm up near Cornwall. I went to Harper Adams when a lot of you went to Silhane back in the day. For the last 10 years, I've got more and more interested in soil. 5 years ago, I had an opportunity to go to America to work with a chap called Gary Zimmer, and he changed my view of soil completely. I looked at soil as brown stuff that we had to look after. He taught me that brown stuff nurtured could be the difference between making a profit or loss. And to give an example, if I combine 2 tons an acre of oats organically, I think I'm some boy. he was combining 7 tonnes an acre of grain maize. And that is why I think we all need to be inspired by what we can do with soil. The potential in it is huge. The importance of soil. This is where it gets difficult. The world's soil still contain 80% of the carbon. We've done a lot to release a hell of a lot over the last 200 years of industrialization, farming, and mainly industry. But there's still a hell of a lot of it in the ground, and we need to build on that and nurture what we've got in there. We need to retain it and build on it. As agriculturalists, we are one of the few businesses globally that can put back the genie that's been released from the bottle. If we increased organic matter by 1.6%, we would stop climate change across the agricultural area across the world. And again, that gives you an example. And we've worked with farmers who, over the last 3 years, have increased their organic matter by 1.3%. If you were to roll that out, and that's done by good mixed farming situations. That is a great idea, James. Thank you. And here's a fag packet figure that one of the ones I really want you to take away is that each 0.1 increase in your organic matter, the brown stuff, when you get your results back, I would love you to take organic matter as part of that process. And if you see a 0.1 increase in your organic matter, that is 8.9 tonnes of CO2 drawn down by the plant and pumped back through the plant's roots into the soil. It pumps back in the soil as a root exudate. It's like a glucose. And this is how, as farmers it can really help draw down what we've released, put back into soil, and build resilience. And that equates to about 2.5 tonnes of carbon per hectare of carbon put back into the soil. Now, you may have been approached by various companies wishing to help you manage soil and monetize it. It's your net worth, it's your net asset. If you build organic matter, it's a byproduct of good farming, good mixed farming as a rule. And you need to understand it before you let somebody else sell it. So measure it, manage it, and you must take the benefit from it, not let some other bugger, excuse the expression, because there's an awful lot of money out there chasing your good work. This is a map of Europe, and its soil biodiversity. It's almost completely interchangeable with soil organic matter. Where you've got good soil biodiversity, you've usually got 2 things: good mixed farming, and you've got rain. So you can see the arable area, especially within the UK, but globally, you can see they're much, much lower. Very poor soil biodiversity, very poor levels of soil organic matter. In my naivety, I thought that areas with low soil organic matter, we could build it faster than areas of high soil, but it seems to be the absolute opposite. Where you've got good, healthy mixed farm systems, and we have in the west of Britain, and certainly in Cornwall, we can, it seems, build soil organic matter because we've got the building blocks, we've got the biology, the bacteria, and we've got the mixed farming systems. You as mixed farmers need to be more praised for the amount of organic matter you've held on to, and we need to be incentivized to bring it more back down into the soil because it's good for you and your business. So I've been asked to ask, what does organic matter do? Well, it does a massive amount for your farm business. It increases the nutrient holding capacity. So when you put fertilizers and manures on, it holds on to it better. The more organic matter, the more holding capacity you've got. It creates a pool of readily available nutrients for your plants, which means you can start to reduce fertilizer. It's food for soil bacteria. The more root exudates you've got, the more organic matter, the more bacteria you build. As they live and die, they provide nutrients back to your plants. So again, it helps reduce the amount of synthetic purchased. Sorry, I'm saying this. You've got your time again in a minute, but and release it in a form that's much more available to the plant. You all know about clover and nitrogen and things. Well, I think there's a lot more we can do with it, but that's a good synopsis, that the clover can fix nitrogen to pass back to the plant. When you build organic matter, when you build soil biology, you've got a hell of a lot more nutrients ready to go back to your plants. From a water point of view, it improves the ability for flash rain, and we're getting more and more of this to infiltrate into the soil. But at the same time, it holds on to more water within the soil, dramatically so. I think it's 200 tonnes per hectare per 1% organic matter. It's a real game changer. We're getting more extreme weather where we don't get mizzle anymore. We get deluges, and then we get droughts. And building organic matter will help offset these things. And by having good cropping systems, if you've got cover crops, you reduce the evaporation. So keeping cover on your farm really helps reduce the evaporation. When we get these very cold, dry, blowy Aprils that we're getting, if you've got cover on the ground, you're still feeding the soil and you're holding on to your nutrients. So it does a heck of a lot for that. But it also encourages root development. Min-till is becoming a thing, and I think it's a very good thing. But because where you've got good root soil structure, it's easier for things to root better afterwards. It prevents more organic matter, the much greater chance you've got of reducing erosion. And it can prevent compaction. You still will get compaction. Don't think you can run a Radiogate tanker over it afterwards and not cause any damage. You will, but it will reduce the impact of it. If you want to see an appalling soil, go to the Midwest of America where they've got GM soils, min-till, but no biology. Our soils are absolutely vibrant compared to that, and you need to be applauded for that. So what are the advantages of increasing organic matter? If you put green crops, if you incorporate green crops, you feed the bacteria in the top of the soils, and this will help increase the organic matter. If you spray a crop off and you put brown stuff back into your soil, you're only putting the sort of the lignin part of it. If you incorporate green crop, you put the minerals, the sugars, and this is much better for the soil. If you put brown matter, compost and manures and things, you actually help to feed the fungal networks of the soil. So the green feeds the bacteria, the brown feeds the fungal network, and they're all vital for this soil health. Incorporating cover crops or grazing them as well will make a lot more available nutrients to your soil, and that will build the biology, build this resilience. And I think I've got this. Yeah, so that's 200 tons, 200,000 litres of water per hectare retained by your soil for dry periods. If you build the biology of your soil, you use mixed lays, you mix cover crops, you can reduce nitrogen by up to 100 kilos. We're doing more and more of this work where we're even putting molasses on the soil to feed the biology of the soil to reduce nitrogen. You know, it's an expensive. This last year, it's been a very expensive nutrient. Using clovers, using cover crops, building the biology, testing for soil available, mineralizable nitrogen means that there's a reserve of nitrogen in your soil. Using compost and things and slurries, the ability to reduce nitrogen is quite dramatic, to the extent that we've got a number of farms now producing 11 tons of dry matter. The average farm in the UK does 7 tons. 11 tons not using any synthetic nitrogen at all. They're using manures and things like that, but the potential for cost saving is huge. And with the development of the carbon markets, and you mustn't sell carbon till you, A, offset your own carbon footprint, and B, understand it. And I really advocate we're not doing this for a while, that the potential in this aggregation is enough to potentially replace the single farm payment and invest in succession and your own farm business going forward, but measure it. I'll speed this up. Soil structure. Lovely picture of soil structure there. What I want you to think about it is, instead of power harrying the heck out of it and leaving a very, very, very fine tilt, you've got to remember that soil needs to breathe. It needs to let nutrients in, water in, but it needs to breathe. It's not often appreciated at how important porosity in your soil is. And cap soil can't breathe. So when you're looking at your soil, you need to let rain in, but breathing out. It needs to respire. It needs to, exactly like you and I do, it needs to breathe. So when you're looking at your soil structure, you want to see earthworm holes, you want to see the ability for oxygen and rain to come and go within the soil, because too often there's a danger of over-processing soil. And with reduced tillage and heavy machinery and grazing that's missed time maybe, I want to make sure that you're not capping this soil, because it's got to breathe to get the optimum out of it. 1 minute. This is a lovely picture of a tool that we used on Mike's, and that's perfect timing. Mike, over to you. So I'm going to pass you on to Mike now, and this is the results of some analysis we've done on his farm.
Can I have your speaker? Hello. Hello. Can you hear me? Could you keep it closer? Yeah, I'd like to get up and see everybody. Thanks for inviting us along. Got a fantastic lineup of speakers here this morning and today, and I feel with Julian here we're a bit of a warm-up act for the rest of the day, actually. So just a bit of brief history about where I'm from and what we do. we're up at Weybridge. We farm about 500 acres. We are a beef suckler herd. We have rented out about 150 acres in the past, but we're gradually brought that back into our own usage over the last 5 years. We had about 180 cows, sucklers. Our aim was to go up to about 250. We had James on farm. My son was quite keen on paddock grazing after he went to a few meetings with James Daniels, and sort of convinced me that we need to have James on and just look at our actual way we farm. I was a bit reluctant. I'm not a great lover of electric fences. I had visions of fodder beet fields and kale fields covered in mud and winter's days, but I must admit I'm converted after about 6 months of paddock grazing. Our steers and heifers, we could see the difference. So we sort of got involved with James, and that sort of led on to the Farm Net Zero project, and that was through involvement for paddock grazing and herbs and herbal lays, and since then we've just sort of developed a whole interest in soil and soil biology and soil health and how we can actually farm without chemicals. Over the last 3 years, we used to always buy about 3 Arctic load of fertilizer. We've decreased that year on year by 1 load. So last year we never bought any. We had about 8 bags left over, and we made that do. We did reduce our number of cows. James suggested if we want to go no chemicals, no fertilizers, then we reduce it back to 140 to 150, which was a bit of a shock to actually, because our natural mentality is to go more. We need more, but actually by reducing our actual number of cattle, we actually reduced our overheads. Yeah, we took 25,000 pounds of fertilizer. That was 3 years ago, so that's going to be a lot more now. That'll probably be 70 or 80,000 pound now. We reduced probably 15,000 pounds worth of labour, and we reduced about 15 to 20,000 pounds worth of feed. So that's what got us really interested. So we've had Tom on farm with his machine, and we've done a full farm audit of our soil, basically. Through the savings, we thought with the savings of our not buying fertilizer, we'd spend the money just to see actually where we got good soils to. And also where we need to spread our dung and our compost, because we have compost in for bedding, we do. So this is organic matter, and we got the full nutrients and P's and K's and pHs as well on a map like this. But you can see our farm. This is a halfway house pub here on the way to the showground. This is A39, so you've got a rough idea where to. We got downs. This ground up here was downs ground up until the Second World War, and got ploughed up after that, and brought back into farming, really, or took into farming. So our organic matters up on the top of the downs is about 16.5%. There's one field there, which is pretty good. What's that like in comparison to a lot of places, Tom?
It's the highest in Cornwall.
Highest in Cornwall. We've got arable fields here. This is a ground here which we've been rented out. This is down around Blable Gate, and our lowest is like 4.5, I think, our organic matter. So, and that's been ploughed, and that's been in maize, potatoes, collie, and spring barley. So that's when you do plough the ground, you do release your organic matter. So what we want to do, this ground up here and beyond is Briok Downs, and it's always renowned for growing grass. You can grow grass up in the summer, and it wasn't actually until we got this back, and actually you see the organic matter in the soil is the reason why you can grow grass, because it's retaining the moisture. Whereas down here, we're on fairly shallow ground, and it does dry out. We can dry out quite quickly in this area. We got about 8 to 9 inches of soil at the best, and it does dry out. So you can see the difference. Yeah, that's 14, 15, 16% organic matter. You've got 4s and 5s and 6s there. This is an interesting field here. That one there. Over here, yeah, it's down lower down. It's in the 4s to 6.8s. Up here, it's in that is from ground level to 6 inches deep. That is from 6 inches to a foot deep. Okay, because Tom's machine will take it in 2 depths. So this field was in cocksfoot mixture for about 10 years. Yeah, we all know cocksfoot is a deep rooting grass. It's a bit more drought resistant. And I believe that there is that colour and a higher organic matter because it had a better root system and a deeper root system than your perennial ryegrasses and the likes. And that's probably the reason why it hasn't got down to 6 inches to a foot, not all the roots. So I've got a bit of a party bag here You'll hold it. Well, if you like to hand it around, because I'd like to show Chris and Dave Rodder this. Don't get too excited, boys. If you'd like to hand that around, this is something that we tried this year. That's a daikon radish, that is. Okay, and we've put that in as a cover crop for winter feed, and also for that's the top of it. That's right. And that's for winter feed, but the only problem is the cattle are a bit like myself. They're not too keen on radishes, so they don't seem to be eating the bulb part of it. But that was actually direct drilled in a field in a arable silage crop, which had about 6 ton of composty dung in the spring, and about 6 ton of composty dung in the spring, and about a hundredweight of fertilizer, one of these here bits of fertilizer we had left, and it had about another 5 or 6 ton of dung before we planted that, and that was actually just direct drilled straight in. So that just goes to show what you can get if you start looking after your soils, and yeah, you don't need your chemical inputs. And bear in mind we haven't sprayed as well, so we're like no fertilizer, no plough, and no sprays. This is the road we're going down, really. This is what got us really excited to begin with. We have this is a plantain. So this is just basically what we put in our fields now. We put in a herbal lay in 2019. We had James on farm in 2020. Here we go, and we paddocked up our first 25 acres of herbal lays in February 2020. We had a bunch of steers on that ground of 70 steers on that for the summer. There's on about another 8 acres of ground which wasn't herbal lays, but those cattle within those paddocks, they actually put on 1.26 kilos a day. And if you times that over 225 days, which are there, because they're out from the 1st of March. So we've actually got shorter winters now because we're turning out earlier because of the paddocks. And we didn't bring them in until mid-October, and they put on something like, I think it's 290 kilos over that time. So yeah, that was without any wormer and without any fertilizer, and these just grew. So that's your plantain. It's hardly so deeper rooting, but it's a great plant. And then this one here is your chicory, and this is a real a root buster, really. You've got these here long roots going down. We had another root coming off there, which was about 6 inches long. So that's like 10 or 12 inch root on it. So that's really getting down into that, on their organic map. That's getting down into that bottom layer of soil to actually help to get some organic matter down and get the biology working down in the soil, which is what we're trying to do. So it's in 2020, when we was grazing our first herbal lays, we noticed that these here GS4s mixtures, the small herbs weren't actually performing. They were getting crowded out by the chicory, plantain, ryegrass, and the clover. So in 2020 we put in a mix which was basically just chicory and plantain in a field we were just seeding out. But in a 12-meter strip through each of the paddocks, right through the field, we put in the small herbs as well as clover and timothy and metafescue. So we wanted to just see what these smaller herbs and older grasses done to the cattle. on the 6th of April in 2021, my son Sam, he went out to shift the fence, and we had 70 heifers in this field, and they went over the fence into the next paddock, and they just stood on this here 12-meter strip and ate this here herbs, small herbs, metafescue, timothy, and we had about 2.5 kilos of clover in that as well. And they just ate it right down to the ground. And yeah, pretty well got that is a video there. Will it go? No. Oh, here we go. This is what we need to see. So this is a paddock. You can just see electric fence there, and that is a 12-meter strip of timothy, metafescue, bird's foot trifle, which is a legume, yarrow, sheep's parsley, and sheep's burnet. So there's 70 heifers there, and they just stood on that and just buggered it basically, because they just ate it right down to the ground. We went and spread dung on it on the next paddocks to try and slow them up, to see if they'd just slow up their consumption, which it did until the next rotation, when they just ate it right down to the ground. And now we haven't got no small herbs there, and we just got a bit of grass and clover. So, but as of this year, these two fields down here, which were in maize this year, so Tom haven't sampled them, but they will go into that in the autumn. So we'll put that in as a whole mixture, just in those fields, just to see what the performances of cattle, because you do wonder about ryegrasses where they've been sold. Have we just been sold them through yield and because they like nitrogen? But you know, to me, that answers a lot of questions. Those cattle like that better than the other grasses. So it's just, is my 2 minutes up?
It is 1.
Well, thank you anyway.
Can everyone hear me? Is that okay? Yeah, I'll stand up, I think. Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name's Ryan Came-Johnson, and I'm an agronomist with Hutchinsons. And I've made a note not to go and see Mike to see if he wants to buy any fertilizer or sprays. So, but yeah, before I start, I would just echo everything Mike says about herbal lays. You know, I've got some experience myself. Personally, I farm a small number of pedigree sheep. I used to farm 350 commercial ewes, but I've cut that right back just to a small number of pedigrees, and I've got some herbal lays myself, and they're fantastic for lamb's growth, for everything. And you know, I've cut out feed completely with my pregnant ewes so far this year, and yeah, they're doing really well on it. The other side of the sort of the day job as an agronomist is that herbal lays are an agronomist nightmare. In terms of weed control, there is no weed control options in them. So I think getting them in the right place and in the right field and at the right point in the rotation as well is really important. You know, and from my experience, I've found that they go in best or cleanest after a cereal crop. You know, direct drilled into a cereal crop where you can clean the ground up and then go straight in with minimal disturbance and get your herbal lay established. So, yeah, just wanted to mention that before I move on, really. So, yeah, the answer to a healthy soil, I'm afraid, cannot be applied from a can. No amount of application of anything is going to stop that. You know, you see it far too often, and really, you know, we need to be doing better. If you've got a field like that, all of your soil, all of your main asset on the farm, and all of your nutrients are down in that bottom corner of the field. And this is what we need to be avoiding. We definitely don't want to be seeing that. You know, the message there really is that we only need to be moving soils when the conditions are right. And again, you know, Environment Agency would have a field day with that. All your asset, your nutrients, your soil, everything else is washing out of the gateway and down the road. So we need to have well-maintained, healthy soils, which are providing good structure, water retention and drainage, and ultimately nutrient availability. So soil has an unholy alliance, and you will not break it. It's basically a combination there of biological, physical, and chemical. And they all interact, these properties all interact to deliver these functions. So a bit wordy, but yeah, you know, looking at optimizing water balance through drainage, minimizing compaction and improving soil structure. On the chemical side, you know, soil likes gentle chemical changes. So not going in and applying a huge amount of lime or huge amounts of nutrients, you know, do it gradually. Maintain an optimum pH, you know, that's really important for nutrient availability. And apply nutrients in right amounts, in the right place and at the right time. Move soil only when necessary, and you know, keep a diversity of plants in space and time. And that ultimately comes under a rotation. Earthworms are massively important. There's some figures there, but an acre of healthy soil can contain up to 500 kilos of earthworms, and they all vary in type from surface worms which work in the surface to worms which are working up and down at depth. But they can process up to 40 tons of soil per year, giving you 5 times as much available nitrate, 7 times as much phosphorus, and 11 times as much potassium, and twice as much mag. So just shows the importance of earthworms, and a healthy soil will naturally encourage and create more earthworms. So really important. Improving soil takes time and planning. As I said at the start, you know, it cannot just be done through a can and through a sprayer. And you know, you can't just change the color of a machine, stop moving soil, cut your inputs, and expect anything other than a bad outcome. So it's got to be something that's built over time, that's planned, and just looking, you know, James asked me to try and quantify soil health and things we can do, and it is very, very difficult because you've got to look at it over, you know, a rotation and plus, you know, a generation even. So looking purely at a financial metric is going to basically lead to minimal change because the financial benefits build with time and a good plan. So plan the rotation, plan where cover crops can be included, and look at, you know, for example, after maize, after potatoes, before the following crop. We want to be avoiding having bare soil at any time across the year, basically. So I've got a few pictures of some cover crops. This was a cover crop trial that somebody, a couple of people in the room will recognise the drill in the field. One of my clients up near Camborne. And initially it started as a trial on quite a poor performing headland. We had some different cover crop mixes. We wanted to put them in, see how they performed. And then this, so you can see, have I got a flashy thing on here? Top of the field here, this was the headland. The rest of the field was in potatoes. And then the potatoes came out, and the farmer actually decided to put a cover crop in the rest of the field before a winter wheat crop. So what we found was, or what you can find with cover crops is improved rooting, and therefore increased nutrient scavenging, improved soil structure, and ultimately, you know, that can lead and should lead to reduced cultivations, reduced depth of working, and therefore reduced fuel use and man hours. So, you know, just think if you can save one cultivation per rotation, how much that's going to save you on your margin with that crop. So, so this was the headland, and this actually was left to go way too far, purely for demonstration purposes. We had some farmers come and have a look. You don't really, you know, and Tom mentioned earlier, I think, about the sort of when things get woody and stemmy and you've got high lignin content, and, you know, I'll show you some more pictures afterwards, but they take a lot longer to break down. You want nice green covers that are easily worked back into the soil. I'll just go back to that. So what we actually did, and it wasn't ever the intention, but we were able to have a mess around with the drill and direct drill straight into this cover crop. So it was sprayed off, and we direct drilled straight into it just for a bit of a look-see, really, to see how it worked. And it did work pretty well. So just some pictures there. Long fibrous roots there, which are going to hold on to soil. You've then got some vetches and clovers, giving a strong deep tap root. You've got nodulation there at the bottom, so that's going to be releasing nitrogen for the following crop. Cover crops are not all, it doesn't always work, and I think that's quite a good message to put out there, is that they don't always work, and the important bit is understanding why. So what we found, this basically, I don't know if you can see it, how well you can see it, but to a line there, you've got a line across there, that's the same line across there. That was where, and you can see it a bit more clearly from the other angle, that was where the headland or the cover crop trial started. This was ex-potatoes with a short-term cover crop. And you can see that immediately after the longer-term cover crop, the crop had much poorer establishment. And really good establishment in the shorter-term cover crop. Now, a few things to take into account. The potato crop would have had much higher fert application. There would have been a lot more soil moved, so that's going to increase nutrient availability. And because the longer-term cover crop got quite stemmy and woody, basically what we think has happened is that it's locked up nutrients. So the important message really is to understand that, if you leave them go too far, then you can actually have a negative impact. What we did actually, and I unfortunately, what I haven't got pictures of is the crop afterwards. Actually, you did see in the barley crop following the wheat crop that it was actually almost greener and better in this poorer area in the wheat. So it just proves that it just takes a little bit longer for the nutrients to cycle. Right, I'll keep moving on. Just try to put some figures. Oh, my circles have moved. They're out of the wrong place. But this is a cover crop biomass evaluation that was done looking at nitrogen, PK content, etc. of cover crop, both the green matter on top and the roots. And I've taken, you've got to be very, very careful with this because you've got an efficiency factor to take into account. So I've taken an average, again, it's very vague, but it can vary from 20 to 50%. So I've taken an average of 35, 165 kilos a hectare there of nitrogen. So if you take the efficiency factor of 35, that takes you to 58. Value of, or 87 with the roots, sorry. Take an N value of approximately 2 pounds per kilo. You could be returning 174 pounds worth of nitrogen back into the soil. Obviously, bear in mind, it's not all readily available. So you've got to take that into account as well. And I think, my take on it is that you're adding to the residual nitrogen level within the soil. So if we have a high-yielding year like we did this year, or last year, just gone, wheat crops needed a lot more nitrogen. And if you've got higher reserves in the soil, you're going to allow that crop to reach its potential. We had some 5, 6, 7 ton to the acre crops this year, and that was where people are using cover crops and have got good residual nitrogen levels in the soil. Am I done? Okay. Just a quick one then. Spade in an hour of your time plus a soil sample costs you 20 quid. Cover crop, 30 to 40 pound a hectare. You can be losing up to 600 pound a hectare on poor performing headlands where you're losing 14 to 35% yield. So just really important to be having a look at this really. That's my key message for build and sustain a healthy soil and help maintain your net margins on your farm. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've heard from our panelists. I'm sure there's plenty of questions out there. If you could keep your questions direct and to the point so we can get in as many as we can. And if you want to aim them at a panelist in particular, perhaps state so in your question. So do we have a question? Yes, Ronit.
I just want to ask about organic matter. I farm on a limited budget. We do our own soil samples each year, and then we used to do them just straightforward, Hutchinson, Mole Valley, or whoever, organic matter, and then now we've been offered through other things, organic, active organic, carbon, active carbon. What should we be sampling? Should we just sampling the top? Should we be sampling all the way down? I've done some deeper ones and they don't have any relevance to the higher ones. As a limited budget farm that we want to know what's going on, what do you suggest? I presume Ted and would know best on these ones.
Tom or Ryan, maybe. Do you want to go for it, Tom?
I don't know if I'm Ted or Ryan.
Well, Ted isn't here, so we'll go for Tom.
As all three of us have found, the time goes fast very quickly when you're speaking up here. One of the slides we've got is organic matter is the proxy to soil carbon, and we're doing all our work based on organic matter. The labs are upselling organic matter and active carbon, hidden carbon, peekaboo carbon, whatever it is that they're looking for. I think organic matter is a really good proxy. It's usually higher in the topsoil. In Cornish soils, I think we've got to be fairly practical. The Farm Carbon Toolkit does some wonderful work down to 50 centimetres. Most of us haven't got 50 centimetres. You'll affect change in the top 6 inches of your soil. You will gradually accrue it between 6 and 12 inches in your soil, 15 and 30 centimetres. But on a limited budget, looking for your own means, measuring that top 6 inches of soil is important, but occasionally do a trace element test, because what we're finding is that a lot of Cornish soils where you're not got a dairy farm using Padstow sea sand, you're generally a bit acidic, you're generally low in sulphur, you're generally low in calcium, and one or two of the trace elements that really help legumes fix nitrogen. So I would do exactly what you're doing, do the top 6 inches, you'll create change. If you're thinking about carbon in the future, if you could just mark in the fields where you're, most phones have got GPS, or you can put GPS on them, just so that you've got a mark in the field that you're taking those samples at. So that if you do it again and you do it exactly the same spot, you've got confidence that you're either building or losing organic matter within that spot. So I wouldn't spend a hell of a lot more money. You can do, of course you can, but do what you're doing. Top 6 inches is where your farming is going, it's where you're building it. And but just mark it if you're interested in the future, and do the odd broad spectrum one, so you can look at the trace elements too, because they will help you roadmap to better production and soil health.
Does that answer your question, Rona? Yeah. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, just with what we've done, we've done a very extensive one. It costs between £5,000 and £6,000, but we're hoping to get that back on the SFI, the Sustainable Farming Initiative grant. And that should actually cover the cost of it. So actually, you're getting a full report of what the farm is or what your ground is, plus and the advantage of actually knowing where you've got to put your FYM or whatever, and you can get the payment back as well. But we haven't done it yet because we're waiting for Tom to come along and do the other few fields. So put it in one go.
Did you want to add anything, Ryan?
I would just echo really what Tom said. As a minimum, PK, MG, pH, and I would do organic matter across some of the fields. It doesn't necessarily have to be done across all the farm, or in every field, but where you've got a change in soil type and that sort of thing, I would definitely take an organic matter sample from the 2 different soil types. And where, with livestock as well, and Tom mentioned trace elements, I would definitely be doing some trace element testing, and particularly on the animal health, you can do an animal health trace element test, which I did on my own farm, and I, saw an uplift of 100 grams a day growth rates in my lambs purely by identifying that I was low in selenium and cobalt and treating for it. So, on an arable side and a livestock side, there's a huge benefit to testing for trace elements as well.
Tom, I've just remembered something. He's going to tell us now quickly. Tom, go.
If you are doing an organic matter test, I think using a test called DUMAS is a hell of a lot more accurate than loss of ignition. And if you are looking at it and you want accurate figures, it's DUMAS. It's slightly more expensive, but a hell of a lot more accurate.
Any other questions? Yes.
Nick Diamond, Truro area, pigs and arable. Question really from Mike. two of you touched upon subletting. Subletting is obviously a big part of the county's economy. It's provided a big crutch for farmers financially, particularly with BPS dropping off. I think what you've done, Mike, is to be applauded, because a reliance on 150 acres of guaranteed sublet income, to suddenly let that go is no mean feat. Was there one factor or a number of factors that allowed you to take that big decision?
One of the main factors was loss of soil, loss of nutrient. We have heavy rainfall, and we found with our soils after potatoes, collies, and maize, if we had a downpour of rain, that would be coming out like the picture was. It would be coming out the gate, and we'd be going down the road and scraping it up. A few years ago, we had the World Rugby Cup on when and the final was on a Saturday. We had an absolute downpour. And I was out in the yard feeding up. Alison said, "Mike, you would come in, the garage is getting flooded." And I thought, "Nah, I can't be really getting flooded." About 20 seconds later, she rung me. I said, I'll be in. I just got to finish up feeding up. 20 seconds later, she rung up and said, "No!" So I thought I'd better go. And there was like half a loader bucket full of silt in the yard outside our garage. And all of a sudden you think, it's wrong. That's not what we're farming for. And we want to, basically want to go to a livestock system, all grass. And we've noticed such a difference now. That field where the 12-metre strip was where we had the problem from. Now we don't get any dirty water. It's clean water running out. And we had two fields which were in maize, collie, and teddies. And we took 2 fields, 10 acres each, and we took 300 tonne of soil back up to the top of the field. And that was just the soil that stayed in the top of the field, not the stuff that ran through the gate at the bottom. And all of a sudden you think, well, we've got to do something different. We're actually losing more than we're probably gaining in the long term. So that was what made us change, really.
We may have time for one more question, or is that it? That's it. Right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to our panellists. I'm sure there are lots of questions out there. There'll be plenty of chance for networking, catch up with these 3 experts, and Mike is quite pleased that I described them as an expert. Later on, at some point during the day, don't be afraid to ask them or get their details so you can speak to them at another time. To summarise, I think there's an awful lot that we need to learn. There's an awful lot, perhaps, as an industry, we've forgotten. Our forefathers maybe knew that, but well, sadly, we've forgotten it due to modern agriculture. And don't be afraid to get out there and speak and experiment. Probably would be, and it may not necessarily always go according to plan, which Ryan has pointed out, but there are lots of options out there that can improve soil health. So thank you very much.